The storm had already swallowed the mountain by the time my in-laws arrived, 3 SUV headlights cutting through a white wall of snow as they crawled up the frozen road toward the cabin they believed belonged to them. They didn't know I was standing in the shadows of the loft, watching them on the security feed. They didn't know the access codes had been rewritten. They didn't know the deed had been rewritten too. They had no idea what was waiting for them behind the door. I held my phone in one hand, the Summit Shield app open, and my breath fogged lightly in the cold air drifting from the foyer. The old cabin creaked around me, settling under the weight of the storm, and for the first time in years, that sound didn't scare me. It reassured me. Because tonight, I wasn't the outsider anymore. I controlled this house. The first SUV slid to a stop in front of the gate. Even from the camera angle, I saw my father-in-law, Roland Stone, throwing his hands up in disbelief. He jabbed the keypad. Nothing. He jabbed again. Nothing. I could practically hear the rising pitch of his voice, even through the muted feed. My husband, Dean, leaned out the window of the second SUV. Try it again, Dad. Again. 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 Access denied. I watched the notification blink across my phone. They had no clue that the cabin they worshipped as a Stone family legacy was no longer theirs to enter. They had signed their rights away years ago without reading a word. Snow pelted the windows so hard it sounded like gravel. The gate refused to budge. Roland kicked it in frustration. His wife, Sylvia, clutched her fur-lined hood against the wind, her face twisted in outrage. I almost smiled. This was the moment every buried insult, every whispered dismissal, every time they made me feel invisible was converging into a single, silent truth. Tonight, they would finally see me. A knock exploded against the wood below. Heavy. Demanding. I walked down the stairs slowly, deliberately. My footfalls echoing like a judge descending to deliver a verdict. There were voices outside, angry, desperate, rattled by the storm. Open this door. What the hell is going on? This is our cabin. No. Not anymore. I unlocked the deadbolt with a soft metallic click and pulled the door open. There they stood, Roland, Sylvia, Dean, and the rest of the Stone clan, coated in ice, breaths coming out in furious white plumes. Behind me, the inside of my cabin glowed warm and golden. My friends were gathered by the fire. Music played softly. A child laughed in the distance. 2 worlds. 1 threshold. And I was the one standing in the doorway. Lucy, my mother-in-law hissed, "Why can't we get in? The gate won't open. Our codes aren't working. The alarms say we're locked out." I let my expression stay politely neutral. Because, I said calmly, you don't have access. Their confusion morphed into fury. Roland stepped forward. Access? Access? This is the Stone cabin. It's been ours for generations. I opened the folder sitting beside the door and held up the deed. Not anymore. The storm roared around us, drowning out their gasps, their accusations, Dean's stunned silence. Snow swirled around the porch in violent spirals, as if nature itself wanted to listen to what came next. Tonight, I would tell them everything. Tonight, they would learn whose name truly owned this cabin. Tonight, they would discover the price of casting me out. And none of them, not even my husband, was ready for what was about to unfold. If you freeze that moment on the porch, the Stones outside, me inside, you'd think the story started there. It didn't. It started weeks earlier, at a dining table where my place had always been just a little too close to the kitchen door. I'm Lucia Kane, 32, senior real estate paralegal at Harborline Title and Trust, and my superpower is spotting loopholes other people are too arrogant to see. I've used that skill to save people's homes, unwind bad investments, and keep clients from signing away everything they own. I just never thought I'd have to use it on my own husband's family. That night, we were at Roland and Sylvia Stone's house, my in-laws, for what Sylvia liked to call our annual pre-Christmas strategy dinner. The table looked like a magazine spread, linen napkins, polished silver, candles the size of wine bottles. The seating plan, as always, told the truth nobody said out loud. Roland at the head of the table. Sylvia at his right. Their children, Dean, his sister Vera, his younger brother Cole, lined up along the sides like trophies. And me? Squeezed into the corner, right beside the swinging kitchen door, where the heat, noise, and stray elbows from the servers bumped into my chair every few minutes. If a draft could vote, it would have been closer to the family than I was. The conversation swirled over my head the way it always did this time of year. Snowfall radar says we're getting a full blanket up at Frosthaven Ridge, Cole announced, scrolling his phone. Perfect conditions. The runs are going to be wild. I already called to pre-stock the wine, Sylvia said, topping off her glass like a queen refilling her own chalice. We're doing a proper stone Christmas this year. Old traditions, no chaos. Fireplace checked? Roland boomed. I'm not having another repeat of that year the flu jammed and the house smelled like a bonfire for a week. That cabin is the heart of this family. We treat it like a sanctuary. I pushed a pea around my plate. Nobody asked how work was going. Nobody asked if I'd managed to bank the vacation time it took to always get them up to Frosthaven early so they wouldn't have to fight holiday traffic. They didn't see me as a guest, or a host, or even a relative. They saw me as infrastructure. The first silence came like a cue. It wasn't natural. It was arranged. Sylvia set her glass down, swirling dark red in the bottom, and gave a tight little smile that meant something was about to happen. Well, she began, just loud enough to erase every other sound, speaking of logistics. Dean's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Vera straightened. Cole smirked. Roland leaned back, ready. I've been thinking about this year at Frosthaven, Sylvia continued, letting her gaze drift, Roland, the kids, the polished centerpiece, before it slid toward me like oil across water. The cabin isn't getting any bigger. And with the world feeling so chaotic, I think we need to circle the wagons a bit. Vera hid a grin behind her napkin. Sylvia took a delicate sip, then dropped the knife. This year, she said, I want Christmas at the cabin to be real family only. No guests. No outsiders. Just the Corestone bloodline. We need to reconnect without distractions. The word outsider landed between the candlesticks like an axe. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I'd been married to Dean for nearly 6 years. I'd balanced their books. I'd handled their insurance renewals. I'd once sat at this exact table and talked Roland through a foreclosure notice he pretended was just a clerical mix-up. But now, suddenly, I was a distraction. I looked at my husband. This was the moment, right? This was where he laughed, kissed my hand, and said, Mom, don't be ridiculous. Lucia is family. Instead, Dean cleared his throat and stared at his plate. You know, Lou, he said, with that apologetic half-smile he used on clients he was about to disappoint. You've been saying you're exhausted. And the altitude always gives you migraines. Maybe Mom's right. You could stay home this year. Have the house to yourself. Sleep in. Binge your legal shows. Vera snorted. Yeah, she added. And it's not like you ski. You'd just be sitting in the lodge all day, watching people who actually know what they're doing. Kind of depressing, honestly. Heat flooded up my neck. Roland pretended to be very busy cutting his steak. Cole studied the tablecloth. No one met my eyes. They were waiting for the show. They wanted tears. A scene. Something they could narrate later as remember that year Lucia overreacted? I felt my fingers tighten around my fork. My knuckles went white. Then I let go. Slowly. One finger at a time. I took a breath, counted silently to 3, and made my voice as smooth as paper. All right, I said. Sylvia blinked, thrown off. All right? If that's what the family needs, I continued, lifting my wine glass, not drinking, just holding, then it works for me. Dean sagged with relief. See? I told you she'd understand, he said, smiling at his mother. She loves her alone time. The conversation surged back, louder than before. They'd gotten what they wanted, my compliance without collateral damage. Under the table, Dean patted my hand like I was a well-trained pet that hadn't bitten anyone at the vet. I didn't pull away. If he'd touched my skin for real, he would have felt it, ice. The quieter cuts followed. Across the table, Roland's elderly aunt leaned towards Sylvia with the subtlety of a bullhorn, her eyes flicking to my flat stomach. It does make sense, you know, she murmured. The cabin is for the children. It's always so odd, having women there who don't have any of their own. Doesn't feel like the full spirit of Christmas, does it? Sylvia sighed, all tragic patience. We all have our burdens, Maud. We just have to be understanding. I heard every word. Dean heard none of it, or pretended not to. I didn't speak. I did what I do best. I took notes. Every insult, every slight, every time my existence was reduced to useful hands and empty womb, I filed them in the mental drawer where I keep case evidence. By the time dessert was cleared, that drawer was full. After dinner, the Stones migrated to the living room for brandy and curated laughter. I cleared plates. I packed leftovers. I scrubbed Sylvia's marble counters until they shone. I told myself I was being kind. Really, I was rehearsing. Sylvia drifted in as I was drying the last glass. She looked around at the spotless kitchen, then fixed those cool green eyes on me. Thank you, dear, she said, patting my arm with fingers that felt reptilian. You really are so convenient for this family. We're going to miss your salads up at the cabin, but I'm sure we'll manage. Convenient. Not loved. Not wanted. Convenient, like a dishwasher. Like overnight shipping. I'm sure you will, I said. And Sylvia? Yes? Check the oven before you go to bed. Her brow creased. Why? I smiled. Because you always forget. I left her standing in her perfect kitchen and grabbed my coat from the foyer. Dean met me at the door, cheeks flushed with wine and excitement. Hey, he said, helping me into my coat. Don't be weird about this, okay? When I get back, we'll do something special. Just you and me. You pick the movie. Anything you want. Even that zoning documentary you like. He grinned like he'd just handed me the moon, not a discount coupon. I buttoned my coat all the way to my throat. Sure, I said. I'll pick the movie. On the drive home, Dean talked nonstop. New snowboard. New jacket. The dinner menu at Frosthaven. Which Black Diamond run he and Cole would conquer first. I drove. I watched the dashed lines on the highway flick past like a countdown timer only I could see. It's going to be classic, Dean said, leaning back. Just like when we were kids. That cabin is the only thing that feels permanent. It's the Stone legacy, you know? I clicked the turn signal and pulled onto our street. Dean? I asked quietly. Yeah? Are you sure that cabin is yours? He laughed. Actually laughed. What kind of question is that? Of course it's ours. It's been in the family since my grandfather built it in the 60s. It's literally the centerpiece of the family trust. Why? You think the mountain's going to repossess it? I pulled into the garage and turned off the engine. In the ticking silence of the cooling car, my reflection in the window shifted. Just slightly. If you'd asked me then what changed in that moment, I wouldn't have had the words yet. Now I do. I stopped thinking like a wife. I started thinking like a managing member. To understand why that mattered, you have to understand the mythology of Frosthaven Ridge. I grew up in a stucco rental in a desert neighborhood where the air conditioner rattled and the only slope I saw was the drainage ditch at the end of our street. Vacations meant tent camping 40 minutes from home. So when I started dating Dean and he described the stone cabin, it sounded like fantasy. He painted Frosthaven like a private kingdom, 3 generations of height marks on the doorframe, a stone fireplace his grandfather supposedly built by hand, summers on the balcony, winters buried in snow. He talked about stone Christmases like they were sacred rituals. The same ornaments, the same menu, the same view out over the valley. I was 24, tired of moving apartments every year, hungry for belonging. I didn't just want to visit the kingdom. I wanted to be written into its history. My first Christmas at Frosthaven, I was just the girlfriend. The novelty. The special guest. I remember stepping into the great room and feeling my lungs forget how to work. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a snow-choked valley. A ceiling of dark beams. The scent of pine and wood smoke wrapping around me like a storybook. I woke up early to start coffee. Glazed the cinnamon rolls. Scrubbed every dish after Sylvia's 7-course dinner because the dishwasher was too loud for Roland's jazz records. They smiled. They complimented. They told Dean. She's such a sweet girl. So helpful. Then came the family photo. Everyone in matching green sweaters Sylvia had knit. Everyone arranged on the hearth like an advertisement for wealth. Okay, everyone, squeeze in. Sylvia chirped, camera in hand. Then she glanced at me. Oh, Lucia, honey, would you mind taking the picture first? We'll get one with you after. I stood by the Christmas tree, camera in hand, and watched them press together, the real family. I took 5 photos. They never did remember to get one with me in it. A year later, after Dean and I married, I thought it would change. It didn't. I got upgraded from special guest to unpaid event planner. I booked flights, hired the plow service, coordinated grocery delivery, and managed the contractor who repaired the deck railing before it collapsed. At cocktail parties, Sylvia would hook her arm through mine and say to her friends, "This is Lucia, our brilliant daughter-in-law. She works in real estate law. She keeps us all so organized." But when the stories were retold, I disappeared. It was always Roland who pulled off the refinance, never me, the one who structured the documents. Dean who found the right contractor, never me, the one who called 12 in a row. The Stones lived in a narrative where their efforts saved everything, and my labor just happened. I told myself it was fine. That love meant serving. That being useful meant being wanted. Then came the year they almost lost Frosthaven altogether. It started with raised voices behind a half-closed door. We were at the Stones' main house for late fall dinner when I passed Roland's study and heard something I had never heard before, panic in his voice. "Balloon payment, they can't do that. We've got 30 days. I told you that startup was solid." My hand froze on the banister. 30 days. At work, 30-day windows are a language I speak fluently. I found Dean in the garage, pretending to reorganize sports gear that had been untouched for years. "What's going on with the cabin?" I asked. He shrugged too casually. "Nothing big. Dad just got tangled up in some bad advice. Used Frosthaven's equity as leverage for a buy-in, and the timing's awkward with this market. It's just paperwork. Don't worry your brain over it." He kissed my forehead and changed the subject. I went to work the next morning and pulled the public records. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a foreclosure notice. Frosthaven Ridge, the holy stone relic, was 29 days away from a bank auction. I could have walked away. I should have. Instead, I did what I always do. I built a plan. We turned the dining table into a war room. Papers spread out. Roland's face gray. Sylvia brittle and silent. Dean looking like a kid caught cheating off the wrong test. "You're going to lose the property," I said, steady, "unless you restructure immediately." Roland bristled. "We never lose anything. We just need a bridge. A line of credit. We've got assets." You have debt, I corrected. But you also have a potential shield. I outlined the structure: create an LLC, Frosthaven Ridge Retreat, LLC, and transfer the deed from Roland's name into the entity. That would let us negotiate new terms, isolate liability, and force discipline. They needed capital up front to stop the immediate bleed. Roland was tapped. Dean had loans. Cole had nothing. I had one thing: the money my mother left me. $75,000 sitting in a high-yield account, waiting for our future down payment. I'll put in the capital, I said. My voice shook that first time. But it has to be done by the book. I'll draft the operating agreement. The bank will want a clearly defined managing member. Roland waved a trembling hand. Whatever you say. You're the expert. I'm a paralegal, not an attorney, I corrected automatically. He'd already grabbed a pen. I trust you. Just show me where to sign. I spent 3 nights drafting. Section after section. Voting rights. Ownership percentages. Roles and responsibilities. When the documents were ready, I put them in front of him and Dean and said the words anyone sane should pay attention to. Read this. Especially the parts on management and member authority. Roland didn't read a line. He signed where I'd flagged with colored tabs. Dean followed. You're a lifesaver, he said, scribbling his name next to mine. Seriously, Lou. We'd be screwed without you. They thought my work ended there. They had no idea I'd just built myself a fortress. Not out of spite. Out of survival. Because on page 14 of that operating agreement, beneath a paragraph of dense legalese, the definition waited quietly. Managing member, Lucia Kane. And under that, the sentence that would one day turn a family Christmas into a controlled detonation. The managing member shall have full and complete authority, power, and discretion to manage and control the business, affairs, and properties of the company. At the time, even I didn't fully grasp what I'd given myself. I thought I was just protecting them. I didn't realize I was also protecting myself. From them. From what they'd eventually do. From nights like the one where they looked me in the face, smiled over their wine, and told me Christmas at their cabin was for real family only. By the time Dean and I pulled into our garage after that dinner, the decision wasn't fully formed. It was just a shape in the dark, something waiting for the right moment. That moment came 3 days later, when I opened the Frosthaven binder again, not as a panicked problem solver, but as the woman whose name sat next to managing member. I flipped past the deed. The initial filings. The loan documents. My finger slid down to section 4.1, management of the company, and this time I read it like I wasn't one of them. I read it like I'd read any other contract for a client. Objectively. Coldly. The authority was absolute. Then I turned to an addendum I'd written months later almost as an afterthought: the rules of occupancy. Fire safety, quiet hours, guest policies. And there, buried in a paragraph about revoking access to disruptive or unsafe users, was a clause I'd drafted to protect us from reckless cousins and their drunk friends. The managing member reserves the right to suspend access privileges for any member whose conduct or the conduct of their guests creates liability risk, endangers property, or violates the cooperative spirit of shared ownership. Back then, I'd written it with Cole and his beer-soaked weekends in mind. Now, my mind filled in new examples. Calling the managing member an outsider. Deliberately excluding her from family gatherings at the asset she saved. Treating her like a disposable servant while relying on her capital. Violates the cooperative spirit of shared ownership. The contract didn't care about emotions. It cared about definitions. And by their own words, by Sylvia's real family-only speech, they'd just defined me out. They thought I was letting them exclude me. They didn't know they'd just handed me legal grounds to exclude them right back. I set the binder down. For the first time since I married into the Stone family, I stopped wondering if I had any power. I started planning how, and when, to use it. If you've never been erased from a family in real time, let me tell you what it feels like. Not like a knife. Like a memo you weren't copied on. 3 days after the real family-only dinner, the Stones created a group chat called Stone Christmas Master Thread. I only found out because Dean forgot to mute his notifications. Bing. Bing. Bing bing. I glanced over. Not a single message included me. Not even a courtesy Lucia's staying home this year. Just. Vera, booked the sleigh ride. Only 6 tickets so we keep it intimate. Sylvia, perfect. Keep it family only. No extras. Cole, should we tell Lucia she can't send any of her healthy versions of the casseroles this year? Loudly crying face. Roland, for once we'll have a real Stone Christmas. Dean, she'll be fine. She needs rest anyway. Vera, lol, she should be grateful she's not expected to cook. Sylvia, exactly. She'll enjoy the peace and quiet. The peace and quiet. They said it like it was a luxury. Not a punishment. Not a ban. Something inside me clicked, the soft, almost inaudible snap of a mechanism settling into place after years of tension. That sound? It was the exact moment I stopped waiting to be accepted. And started preparing to be respected. I sat at my desk the next morning, coffee cooling beside me, drafting something the Stones would never imagine needing protection from. A revised occupancy and access addendum for Frosthaven Ridge Retreat, LLC. Nothing dramatic. Nothing suspicious. Just subtle clarifications. Guest access must align with the cooperative spirit of shared ownership. Cooperative spirit shall include inclusive usage consistent with fiduciary fairness. Exclusionary behavior, discrimination, or conduct undermining the managing member's participation may result in revoked access. All true. All reasonable. All enforceable. And every line was a paper-cut reminder of what they'd done. I sent the updated version to the LLC partners, Dean and Roland, using the same cheerful subject line I always used. Quick cabin update, smiling face with smiling eyes. Dean signed electronically within 12 minutes. He trusted me implicitly with anything involving paperwork. Roland took an hour. Likely because he couldn't remember his DocuSign password. Neither man read it. They never did. The cabin had a high-end security system with remote management. I logged in. Every stone had an access profile, door codes, gate permissions, alarm disarm rights. I edited each one. Not deleted. Just frozen. Inactive due to policy compliance review. My access remained fully active, along with 2 new profiles. Kane guessed 1. Kane guessed 2. I smiled. Sylvia had said I wasn't real family. Fine. I would be the host. They would be the outsiders. Next, I made a phone call I never dreamed I would make. Not to a lawyer. To the county sheriff's office up near Frosthaven Ridge. Hi, I said, cheerful and polite. I just wanted to let you know, I'm the managing member of Frosthaven Ridge Retreat, LLC. We've had issues with unauthorized entry in previous seasons. I've updated the occupancy rules, and only authorized guests are allowed on the property this holiday. The deputy on the line was friendly. No problem at all, ma'am. If anyone tries to force access, we'll dispatch immediately. Want us to note the names? I gave him the Stones' names. Every single one. My voice didn't shake. That weekend, I invited my people. Not for revenge. For rebalancing. Friends who had supported me. Co-workers who treated me like an equal. My goddaughter whose laughter made any room warmer. I didn't tell them everything. Just that I wanted a holiday that felt like joy, not obligation. Every single person said yes. I thought the cabin was your husband's family tradition, my friend Cam asked as we loaded groceries into the SUV. It was, I answered. This year it's mine. She didn't ask more. She knew my tone. She knew something was coming. Not chaos. Not cruelty. Something cleaner. Justice. The stones had no idea. But oh, the universe has a sense of humor. Because at 10 p.m. that night, Dean walked into our bedroom, humming as he folded clothes for his stone-only Christmas trip. "Do you want me to bring you back anything? Hot cocoa mix? A pine cone? Snow?" I looked up from my book. "Dean," I said gently, "did you read the revised addendum I sent?" He froze mid-fold. "The what?" "The access policy update." "Oh," he said, shrugging, yeah, totally. I signed it." "You didn't read it." "Babe," he laughed. "It's paperwork. You handle that stuff. You're amazing at it. I barely understand half the things you send me." He didn't notice the change in my voice. He didn't hear the storm building. He didn't understand that he'd just confirmed something crucial. He trusted me more than he respected me. And his family respected him more than they trusted me. Dangerous imbalance. For them. 3 days later, when the Stones loaded their SUVs, smug and insulated from consequence, they still thought they were heading to their mountain. Their cabin. Their holiday. Not one of them suspected the winter storm waiting for them wasn't the one in the forecast. The night before they drove up, I stood in the cabin's great room, lit only by the crackling fire. The renovation lights glowed softly on the beams. The windows trembled with wind. I walked to the mantel and placed the binder down, the binder I'd built, the one they never appreciated, never even understood. Then I whispered the words that had formed in my chest ever since Sylvia's voice slid across that dinner table. "You don't want me in your family? Fine. But don't forget. I'm the one who holds the keys." The flames hissed, almost approving. The storm outside intensified. And at that moment, I knew. They were walking into a lesson. Not vengeance. Not punishment. A lesson about ownership. Respect. And consequences. They had no clue the locks would click in their faces. No clue whose name had been holding their legacy together. No clue that the girl in the corner seat, quiet, helpful, convenient, had rewritten the entire map of the mountain beneath their feet. The wind howled against the windows as I faced them on the porch, Roland, Sylvia, Vera, Cole, and my husband, Dean, all of them soaked with snow, cheeks bright with fury and disbelief. Behind me, the cabin glowed warm and golden. Around them, the mountain raged. 2 worlds. 1 door. "Lucia," Roland growled, breath fogging the air, "move aside. We're not playing games." I met his stare evenly. "This isn't a game." He stepped forward and grabbed the doorframe like he could rip it off its hinges. "This is our cabin." I lifted the deed, the new deed, and tapped the highlighted line. Wrong tense. The silence fractured. You changed something," Sylvia whispered, eyes darting over the legal jargon she couldn't interpret, her confidence cracking for the first time. "No," I corrected. "Your husband did. He signed every document." "So did Dean." Vera scoffed. "Please. Dad would never give up control of Frosthaven." "You're bluffing." I nearly felt sorry for her. Nearly. "Why don't you call the county clerk's office?" I suggested. "Ask who legally owns the property." Cole was on his phone instantly, gloved fingers fumbling. "Dad, what's the parcel number again?" Roland rattled it off. A moment later, Cole's face drained of all color. Dad? It says the managing member is," he turned the phone toward them. "Lucia." Vera snatched it. "You idiots," she hissed. "You signed this? You made the outsider the owner?" Dean flinched. I thought it was just paperwork." "It was the rescue agreement, not." "Not what?" I cut in. "Not important enough to read?" His mouth snapped shut. He knew. They all knew. The entire family dynasty had just been undone by their own arrogance. As the shouting erupted, a pair of headlights cut through the snow. A county SUV crawled up the driveway, blue lights flashing faintly through the storm. The stones froze. A deputy stepped out, snow crunching under his boots. "Evening," he called, approaching the porch. "We got a report of attempted forced entry." Vera spun toward him. "Forced entry? This is our cabin." The deputy checked the tablet mounted in his hand. "Ma'am, according to the registry, the managing member and controlling owner is," he turned the screen toward them. "Lucia Kane." Sylvia gasped like someone had struck her. My voice was soft. "I notified the sheriff's office earlier this week about unauthorized access attempts." "Standard procedure." Roland's face turned beet red. "You weaponized the sheriff against us? Against family?" "I protected my property," I replied calmly. "Something every owner has the right to do." The wind tore through the porch railing, scattering snow like shards of white glass. The deputy stepped between us, hands raised. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, unless you have written permission from the managing member, state law requires you to vacate the property." The Stones stood there, breathless, humiliated, stunned, like the mountain itself had betrayed them. Dean's face twisted, panic rising through him like a tide. "Lucia, sweetheart, please. Let's talk inside." I kept my body still. Controlled. "When you excluded me," I said quietly, "you violated the LLC's cooperative clause. You gave me legal grounds to revoke access." His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "So this is revenge?" he whispered. "No," I said. "This is accountability." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can't do this to my family." "You already did it," I replied. "I just followed your definition. Real family only." Something ugly flashed across his expression. "So what, you're the family now?" "No," I said. "But I'm the only one who treated this property like it mattered. I'm the only one who saved it. And I'm the only one whose name is on the management documents you refused to read." I softened slightly, not in pity, but in truth. "You wanted a Christmas without me, Dean. Now you have one." He staggered back as if I'd struck him. The wind screamed harder, whipping snow across the porch. The deputy stepped forward again. "Mr. and Mrs. Stone, we need to clear the area. Road conditions are worsening. You can head back to town and sort this out later." Roland tried to push past him. "This is my cabin." "Sir," the deputy said firmly, "if you attempt to enter, I will have to treat it as trespassing. Please don't make me escalate this." Roland froze. Not because he feared arrest, but because he finally understood something. The law wasn't on his side. His son wasn't on his side. Not even the mountain was on his side. For the first time in his life, Roland Stone was powerless. He turned to me, eyes burning. "You will regret this," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Oh, I do," I said softly. "I'm protecting what I built." As the Stones retreated toward their SUVs, shaken, furious, scattered, Vera spun back toward me, hair whipping across her face. "This isn't over," she spat. "You might have won tonight, but the Stones always get back what's theirs." I leaned against the doorframe, calm as snowfall. "Funny," I said, "because I've gone through every document. Every deed. Every trust. Every operating agreement. And legally?" I paused. "You never owned it." Vera blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Roland took out loans he never repaid. There were liens. Defaults. You were one step away from losing the cabin forever when I stepped in." Her face twisted with horror. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, "your legacy was gone long before I ever touched it. I didn't steal your inheritance. Your father lost it decades ago. He just didn't tell you. The look on their faces? A family myth collapsing under its own weight. A dynasty shattering. A truth they couldn't swallow. I stepped back inside, nodded politely to the deputy, and closed the door with a soft, final click. The sound echoed in the great room like a gavel. My friends turned toward me from the fire. "Everything okay?" Cam asked. I hung the deed on the entry hook like a coat. "Yes," I said. "Perfect." But deep inside, beneath the calm, something stirred. Because the Stones weren't defeated. Not yet. They were desperate. Wounded. Cornered. And people like that don't retreat forever. They regroup. They retaliate. They come back. And part of me was ready for that. Maybe even waiting for it. If the lockout was the explosion, the days that followed were the smoke, a thick, lingering haze where every shadow could have been a threat. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The Stones were not the kind of family that accepted humiliation quietly. They didn't withdraw. They reorganized. And they came back swinging. The morning after the deputy escorted them off the mountain, I woke in the cabin's loft to the soft crackle of the fire and the scent of cinnamon wafting from the kitchen. My guests were laughing downstairs, unaware of the family war brewing in the snow outside. I slipped out of bed, wrapped myself in a blanket, and checked my phone. 27 missed calls. All from Dean. 10 voicemails. 3 from Roland. 1 from Sylvia that began with a sniffle and ended with a threat. A text from Vera. "Hope you enjoyed your little power trip. It's going to cost you everything." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling nothing, no fear, no regret, no second thoughts. Just clarity. The Stones weren't fighting for Christmas. They were fighting for control. And they had no idea they'd already lost it. It was late afternoon when the sheriff's SUV pulled up again. Cam looked up from the hot cocoa she was stirring. Lucy? Did you call them again?" "No," I said. My pulse ticked up. The deputy approached, hat pulled low, cheeks red from the wind. "Morning, Miss Kane. Sorry to interrupt your holiday." "It's no problem," I said, stepping onto the porch. "Is something wrong?" He cleared his throat. "I received a call from your husband. He claims there's been a misunderstanding and asked us to escort him back onto the property to resolve a domestic issue." I inhaled slowly. Of course Dean would try this angle. I glanced down the mountain road. Sure enough, another SUV was crawling up the icy incline. Dean's. Alone. He'd come without the Stones. That was new. The deputy continued, "He says he's your spouse and therefore has rights to the property. Legally speaking, that's not necessarily accurate. Depends how things are structured." I smiled faintly. "I can clarify." When Dean reached the porch, he barely felt the cold. His anger kept him warm. "Lucia," he said through clenched teeth, "this has gone far enough." I folded my arms. "What exactly do you want, Dean?" "To come inside," he snapped. "To talk. To fix this. You blindsided my family and made us look insane in front of law enforcement. My mother is hysterical. My father's blood pressure. Your family excluded me," I said evenly. "Publicly. Repeatedly. And you supported them." He flinched. "I never meant. You never meant to read the documents you signed, either." The deputy cleared his throat. "Ms. Kane, if there's paperwork that outlines ownership." I held up a folder. Inside was the original operating agreement. The addendum they'd signed without reading. And the capital contributions ledger showing I'd funded the entire rescue. I handed the deputy the top sheet. He scanned it, nodding slowly. "Ma'am, this is very clear. Your authority is absolute under the LLC structure. Unless she grants you access, sir, He turned to Dean. "You have no legal right to be on this property." Dean's eyes iced over. "So that's it?" he whispered. "You're choosing a cabin over your marriage?" "No," I said softly. "I'm choosing myself." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You were supposed to be different," he said hoarsely. "Not vindictive. Not calculating. Not like them." I stepped closer. "I became what your family required to survive." His jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said calmly. "It isn't." I reached into the folder and handed him another sheet. His divorce petition. The petition wasn't the twist. The other document tucked behind it was a forensic financial audit I'd commissioned quietly during the fallout, one that traced the Stone finances back a decade. Dean skimmed the summary. His face strained. You hired an auditor?" "No," I corrected. 3. "What is this?" "Proof," I said, "that your father didn't lose the cabin because of a bad investment." Roland had always told the story with pride, how the cabin was a Stone legacy, passed down untouched through generations. It wasn't true. I tapped the final page. It was never inherited. It was bought at auction 35 years ago. Your grandfather didn't build it by hand. He lost everything gambling. Your father covered it up. The family legacy you worshipped was a smokescreen. Dean's hand shook. "That's not possible." "It is," I said. "And the best part? When your father refinanced the cabin, he violated the loan terms repeatedly. The property was weeks from seizure when I stepped in." I looked him dead in the eyes. "I didn't steal your inheritance. I saved a lie you were all too comfortable believing." Dean sank onto the porch railing like the mountain had shifted beneath him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was broken. "Lucia," his voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said. "Can't we fix this?" "No," I said gently. "Because the day you sat at that dinner table and stayed silent while they called me an outsider, that was the day you chose your family over your wife." He swallowed hard. "I don't know who you are anymore." "You never did," I answered. The deputy stepped forward. "Sir, I'll need you to head back down the mountain." Dean stood, numb. His breath trembled in the freezing air. Finally, he said the quietest truth of the entire marriage. "I should have chosen you." I nodded once. "You should have." He walked back to his SUV. He didn't look back. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled. My friends cheered when I returned. Someone poured me a glass of wine. For the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me, not victory, not triumph. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind Sylvia described, where someone's silence was convenient. Peace earned. Owned. Chosen. That night, a snow-blanketed Frosthaven Ridge, I stood at the window and watched the lights of Dean's SUV disappear into the storm. I felt no regret. No dread. No fear of the future. Only certainty. Because I finally understood the truth. They hadn't excluded me from their Christmas. I had outgrown it. And the cabin? It wasn't the prize. I was. The storm eased. The mountain breathed. And for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. Please click the subscribe button, like, share and comment. This will encourage me to make more interesting stories. Also let's know where you are watching from. Thank you and see you in the next story.